Seeing as Halloween is right around the corner, the best time of the year, and you can fight me on that, I figured it would be fun to make a spooky kind of themed project out of bone. So today we're gonna try our hand at making a bone ring. I've worked with bone before, but I've never tried to make like a ring, so let's see how this goes. For starters, I'm using this piece of cow bone that used to belong to my dog Oreo. It has a nice thick wall I can use, and this area is clearly big enough to fit my ring. To cut it to size, I passed it through the bandsaw as far as I needed to go. Then I took my ring and used that to size the piece that I had cut out. Then brought it back to the bandsaw and cut off any of the excess stuff so I don't need to sand it away later. With that roughly cut to size, I draw in the shape that I'm going for, which is this roughly signet style ring. Then it's back to the bandsaw just to free cut away any of those excess corners, again, so there's less grinding to do later on. Now with that roughly in shape, I brought it over to the belt sander just to start smoothing out those edges and getting rid of any of the tool marks that the saw left behind. Cool, with that looking slick, it's time to get the hole for my finger to actually fit through. To do this, I used my ring to draw another circle and then drew a cross inside of that to roughly get the center of that space. Now the drill bit I'm actually using is a 3/4 countersink bit, mostly because I felt like it wasn't too aggressive like a regular drill bit. It might actually pull the piece of bone up into it or maybe crack it, whereas in the countersink bit more kind of grinds it away as it goes through. It's a little bit slower going, but as you can see, it did a really great job. The cut is super smooth and the size perfectly fits around my finger. Might I just say how nice it is to have a exactly 3/4 around size ring finger. It's nice to have an imperial unit for a ring finger. It just makes things easier. Anyway, from here it's time to get a little artsy with this thing and actually put a design in that top space there. I'm figuring to go with the motif because it is made out of bone. I could just go ahead and make like a little skull on there. I think would be cool. So to get that started, I first find the very center of that space. Then in that center, I roughly sketch out a skull. Not going for perfect here, I'm just trying to identify where all the low points and the high points are gonna be. Now, if you don't think of yourself as being particularly artistically talented with this, you're not gonna be able to free sketch something, check out this video here where I show you how to actually put a picture onto the bone first before you carve it out. This way you can just print out a picture you like and then carve that. With that in place though, I first start by carving out the area around the skull just to lower it and thus making the skull raise up a little bit. For the carving of the actual skull itself, I just kind of used a fine bit and slowly went over all of my details until everything was at the depth I liked. So the way I'm going to be making this stand out later on is by adding some paint into it and then kind of wiping it away so all the high points are lighter and the low points are dark. So as you're carving, you're kind of almost picturing carving with shadow. You want all the lower parts to end up being darker, so just picture those as being like your lines as if you were drawing, and just make sure they're a little bit deeper. Just go nice and slow and you should be fine. It also helps to have some compressed air nearby just to clear off any of the bone dust as you go. And do make sure you're wearing a mask while you're working with this stuff. Breathing in that bone dust is actually really bad for your lungs. You don't want to be breathing this stuff in. Once I was happy with the skull, I drew in this border to add just a little bit of extra interest to the piece. Then inside of that space, I just kind of stippled it with the sharp bit to make this cool kind of honeycomb appearance. In fact, I like that so much, I decided to do it all around the rest of the ring too. In these little spaces, I used a wider bit to lower those areas down before going back in and stippling it like I did above. Doing this and giving it this texture is gonna give a nice place for paint to sit later on so I can have those areas be darkened. Kind of the same as you do if you're doing a background tool if you're working with leather, if you know how to do that. Now for my paint, I am just using some acrylic black paint that I brush into all the little crevices I want to stand out. And then I immediately wipe all the excess paint away from the surface. After filling up all those little spaces with paint, I go back over it with this buffing tool to remove all of the surface paint and return the bone back to a bright white. That contrast really brings everything out and makes all the detail come to the forefront and also gives a little bit of age to the piece. And there you have it! You now know how to make a ring out of the remains of your enemies! I hope you enjoyed this quick skill. If you did, why don't you give me some of that like it love, and don't forget to subscribe so you know when I release new content. In the meantime though, keep leveling up, you.